Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. President Obama crediting Pope Francis for playing a key role in finalizing a deal to open relations between the United States and Cuba for the first time in 53 years and aiding in the release of jailed American Alan Gross. Obama gave special thanks to the pontiff in announcing the breakthrough, saying, quote, His Holiness Pope Francis issued a personal appeal to me and to Cuba's President, Raul Castro, urging us to resolve Alan's case and to address Cuba's interests in the release of 3 Cuban agents who've been jailed in the United States for over 15 years. Here with more details about the Pope's involvement is former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Francis Rooney. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you for having me on, Lauren.
It's great to have you. First, I want your thoughts and reaction to Pope Francis helping to broker this deal to release Alan Gross.
Well, the Holy See is always keen to become involved in resolving conflicts among sovereigns. They have a 1,200-year tradition of doing that, going back to the crowning of Charlemagne. And this is no surprise to me that if they have the opportunity to effect a change that they feel is important, they're more than willing to jump in.
You know, a key meeting took place at the Vatican this fall to make this happen. Can you tell me what that would have looked like, the details surrounding that, the kind of rooms, who would have been in the room? Can you tell me any of those details?
I would imagine they kept it pretty close, given the secrecy that was maintained throughout the process. Probably the Pope and maybe one key advisor, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, who has great Latin American experience, having served as nuncio in Venezuela. And they probably would have met in the Pope's private library, the same one where we were with President Bush.
And I suppose just being at the Vatican, because many of us have been at the Vatican, and it's very imposing just being there through all that history, that had to be an influence in itself.
Well, you know, we've talked before about the tradition and sense of permanence and stability that you feel when you walk through the Apostolic Palace, and you see things that have been maps that have been on the wall since the 15th century.
You know, Pope John Paul II visited Cuba in 1998. Benedict visited just recently in 2012, almost 3 years ago. How were they able, if possible, if they were able to sort of lay the groundwork for what Pope Francis did today?
You know, I think that's a really good question, and I definitely think their visits did lay the groundwork. Both of those visits focused on denouncing the Marxist repressive regime of Cuba, but at the same time calling for an end to the United States' isolation of it. I think it was Pope John Paul that said the world needs to open up to Cuba and Cuba needs to open up to the world.
The thought now is this is an atheist government. Is Pope Francis also helping in perhaps opening up religious freedom in Cuba as well?
Well, I think inevitably it will. The church is always interested in taking whatever small step it might to improve the human condition. That's where they differ from secular sovereigns, is they don't have secular interests to protect, and they can focus exclusively on improving the human condition, particularly religious freedom and human rights. You know, when Pope John Paul went, it was kind of the first apertura, if you will, of some religious freedom and restoration of some religious holidays in Cuba, and things have continued in dribs and drabs ever since.
Do you see this as a good thing? Because there are many critics here talking about this new relations between Cuba and the United States and saying that perhaps this is a bad thing, that it would spur many of their enemies, the U.S. enemies, to sort of kidnap Americans just for the sake of having this kind of brokered deal.
Okay, I think anytime we exchange prisoners and try to broker the release of people is a bad thing, because that sets a bad precedent. And we've seen that in the Middle East, and we saw that just recently in Cuba. On the other hand, there are many people who are going to fear the relaxation of the trade isolation of Cuba with some very good reason. You know, the opening up of trade and allowing $2,000 a quarter of remittances from Cubans in the United States back to Cuba will inevitably improve the suffering of the people there, which is the Holy See is going to feel real good about, and it supports their diplomatic objectives, but it might not support all the United States objectives, since we really don't want to empower and increase the survivability of a repressive Marxist regime.
You know, also, it's Pope Francis' 78th birthday today, and he may be known for what he gave today, or known for what he gave today rather than what he's receiving. Is that sort of typical Pope Francis?
Well, he made a big point of saying he didn't want a big birthday, and I think he ended up getting a big birthday because of the timing of this announcement.
Very interesting. Ambassador Rooney, thank you so much for being on A Spirited Debate. We'll probably be watching this even more as the details of this whole deal come out. Thank you so much for being on A Spirited Debate.
Thank you, Lauren.